Hi there. I might like Marvel Crisis Protocol just a bit. All right, let's get some of this stuff out of the way. It's good to be back filming again. I apologize as usual for the little hiatus here, but I've just been, a little bit of a creative burnout. Didn't really feel like making some videos for a period of time. Obviously, life gets in the way, and I definitely don't. This is obviously my job. I don't want to treat it like a job. I just want to make things when I feel inspired, when I want to share something I love, and I am going to share something I love today, and this is Marvel Crisis Protocol. Now, if you don't know what Marvel Crisis Protocol is, Marvel Crisis Protocol is a miniature skirmish game. So if you are unfamiliar with those terms, obviously when you have board games, they're like a self-contained box. You have, everything that you need in that box, and it's sort of obviously, self-contained. Miniature skirmish games and miniature war games are different, where you have typically like a rule set or a system, and you have different packages of miniatures. You can usually mix and match and combine stuff. There's a little bit more customization. It's a little bit more broad, and you sort of get involved as well from a hobby aspect, where you do need to sort of build and paint your own miniatures and terrain and stuff like that. And it's a lot more free form. You usually have like a battlefield where you're measuring in inches, rather than having like specific places where you place models. And that's sort of the general gist of it. If obviously Warhammer 40k is probably the biggest miniature game that people know about. But there's sort of two different classifications, where you have miniature war games, which are large scale, big Warhammer 40k is that one. And then you have miniature skirmish games, where you have like Kill Team or Warcry, where they're smaller scale. You have a lot less models, so you're, rather than controlling like 30 plus models, you're controlling maybe like 3 to 12 models. So there's a lot of variance when it comes to that. So this is a miniature skirmish game. So this is smaller scale. Obviously, from the name, you can probably tell it's in the Marvel universe. So you're using Marvel superheroes and supervillains to fight against each other in a variety of different missions. And it's typically first to score 16 points in 6 rounds, or tabling your opponent and killing them and getting all your enemies' models off the board. So there's a couple of ways to win there. So that's the general gist. I wanted to share my love about this game because I think this game's absolutely fantastic. And I love skirmish games. My friends and I have played some cooperative ones, and then we have played some competitive ones as well. Warhammer Kill Team being the main one. And I think this is probably one of the best, if not the best ones. I think it's just extremely well designed. I think the publisher behind it is consumer friendly. I think that it's great for a variety of different players, where I can't really say the same for something like Warhammer Kill Team. And I am going to make a lot of comparisons to Warhammer Kill Team because that's the only other major skirmish game I've played. But I'll draw some comparisons, of course, in between them here and there. But why I wanted to dive so much into this one was mainly because of my friends. If I'm not able to play a game with my friends, it's very unlikely I typically pick up a board game, outside of solo board games, of course. And so I've always loved skirmish games. My friends and I, we did play the old edition of Kill Team way back when in 2018, and we even played some of the new version of Kill Team once the 2021 version came out. But one thing about Kill Team is there's just so much nuance to it. It's not a really beginner-friendly game if you've never played a skirmish game before, and if you're not someone who really dives into the strategy of the game and really sinks their teeth into it, you're not going to have that much fun of a time, which is definitely one of the downsides. The barrier to entry is granted, it's a very, very well balanced game, but it's at the same time extremely difficult barrier to entry. And so my friends and I played Kill Team. We sort of dropped off. We moved on to other things. And then when I wanted to, I got back into Kill Team a lot more earlier this year, playing especially on like Tabletop Simulator, for example. I wanted to get my friends back into it as well. But whenever I brought up Kill Team, I could see the sweat building up on their forehead and the hesitation of having to like relearn everything and get back into things that way. And after the course of trying to do it multiple times, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop pushing. My friends aren't into Kill Team, and they won't get back into Kill Team, which is perfectly fine. Like, I understand where they're coming from. So I did a little bit more research. Marvel Crisis Protocol was one of those games I've always seen on board game shelves. I've seen like there's so many models for the game, and it did look a little bit intimidating. And I'm not really a Marvel person, But doing a little bit more digging about the game, it still was something that I always wanted to try. And doing a little bit more research into the game, I realized, okay, this game system, the system that they've developed, it seems a lot more beginner friendly, but at the same time, it still seems like there's a lot of strategic decisions and a lot of nuance to the game still, where it will itch that sort of competitive feel for myself. Because that's one of the things I loved about Kill Team, is like there's a lot of strategic decisions to make. So I ended up getting the core set. This is the core set, the second edition. This was, I believe, launched just last year. And you can still get the old edition of the core set, which I'll get to later, but you can still get the core older core edition, and it's still a really, really good purchase. And this comes with like 13 models. It comes with all the measurement tools that you need, comes with the dice you need, comes with all the tokens you need. So there's a lot of replayability just in this one box. Unlike, I think, the starter box at Kill Team, where you actually don't get your full rules for your squads. This you get completely everything. So you could actually just purchase this, split it with a buddy, and you're off to the races for quite a long time. You could get quite a bit of gameplay out of it. So I ended up getting that. It comes with the 2 affiliations or affiliation focuses. We'll get into that a little bit later, but you have your Avengers against the Cabal, with like Red Skull, and you have like other villains like Doc Ock, for example, Ultron in the starter set. And so I built the models, built the terrain, because it comes with a bunch of terrain as well. That's really, really good. And I brought one of my friends over. We played a 1v1. Didn't get through the whole game, but we both absolutely loved it. And my friend, not only that, just, he picked up the rules very, very quickly. By the end of the session, he was playing everything on his own. Didn't really need to ask him any questions about the general gameplay flow, which is really, really nice. Whereas Kill Team, my friends and I ran them through multiple games. It probably took them like 4 to 5 games just to sort of get the basic game flow down, because it's just that much of a complex game. And so after that little test, I got one more box to sort of get a few more models. I got my Hulkbuster, which is the main model that I wanted in my roster. Like, absolutely killer model. I love the action poses in this game. This is actually physically the biggest model in the game, which is also a little fun thing. Yeah, I got Hulkbuster. I ended up bringing my other friends over, my general game group, and we had a 4-player free-for-all, because they have an official game mode called Separation Anxiety. It's a 4-player free-for-all game mode. Sort of revolves around the Venom symbiotes, and it's a very, very fun, just casual, chaotic game mode, but you're also only controlling about 3 or 4 models, so it's very, very easy. It's nice to ease people into it. And everyone, again, same thing. Everyone absolutely loved it. They loved the Marvel. A lot of them are also more Marvel fans than I am, so it made it a lot easier to connect with the theme of the game, whereas Warhammer 40k, if you're really not into the lore and stuff like that, it's a little bit hard to connect with the models. So yeah, that was really, really awesome getting them into it. And so it was enough that we wanted to actually, make complete rosters. Where the dream for me was, like, what I wanted for Kill Team was that we would have skirmish days where, like, I set up 2 tables, we just have like a bunch of people over, we have like multiple games going on, and it's just a very, very good get together type thing. With Marvel Crisis Protocol, that's something that we can actually accomplish. So they actually all wanted to complete their rosters and have like a full 10 models for their roster to be able to mix and match and have different squad loadouts for different missions. And yeah, I have my full roster completed. My friend is 3D printing some models to sort of supplement some of the more expensive ones like Thanos or Cosmic Ghost Rider, for example. And yeah, we're all working on full rosters. So the dream is happening there. So it's going to be very, very exciting to actually have like also hobby days where we all get together and paint the models together and stuff like that. So yeah, it was super, super easy to get people into it. And that's sort of the main reason why I wanted to get into it, is just to get my friends into a skirmish game that we could all sort of have those things together. And I even was able to rope in another friend who's not part of our normal regular game group, and she's a big Marvel fan, so it was very, very easy. And she, again, this is her first miniature skirmish game, and she was able to pick up the game super, super quickly, and she was playing on her own by the end of the game session. So it was very, very cool to see that as well. But let's move on to why this game is so fantastic. So there's obviously going to be timestamps, so if you are curious about a particular reason why I think this game is amazing and why you should try it yourself, you can obviously skip to the appropriate thing. This might be a little bit of a longer video because I'm just going to be talking and stuff like that, so if you are someone who is more visual, I apologize. I will have some B-roll and stuff like that potentially. Maybe just a small scene just showing off the models here and there. Yeah, so first reason is Atomic Mass Games, the publisher and developer of this as well. If you're also familiar with like the Star Wars miniature games, they're actually the ones who took over like Fantasy Flight games. So like Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Armada, and Star Wars X-Wing, I believe, are the ones that they took over. So they actually publish those ones now and create stuff for that. Atomic Mass Games is own developed games. This is their first one, Marvel Crisis Protocol, and last year they just launched Star Wars Shatterpoint. So if you are someone who likes Star Wars as well, they got really, really good game systems for that. The Star Wars Shatterpoint actually uses their same measuring tool system. That's sort of like their own proprietary like sort of game mechanic system. So, and they use like the same D8s, similar D8 system. So there's a little bit of crossover there. Atomic Mass Games, who's the publisher for this and the developer, I would say they're just like extremely consumer friendly, which is what I really, really like. I think anyone who's played Games Workshop's games can, even their super fans can probably attest that Games Workshop is very anti-consumer. They just aren't great when it comes to sort of what rule books you have to buy and having to keep up to date on everything yourself and how much that can cost. Whereas something like this is, first of all, the core rulebook is completely free online for this game. So you theoretically could do everything free if you wanted to like just test out the game. So if you had, they have all their base size requirements for each model as well for free on their website. So as long as you get the base size right, because that is mechanically important for like moving as well as measuring out line of sight, it just uses the bases for this game. So that you do need a specific size requirements. So you could 3D print your own, for example. And then it's just a matter of getting terrain. Terrain is important in this game because you can like throw it. You can throw characters into terrain, and it does have a mechanical importance. And each official terrain piece comes with a size. You would just need to assign a size to the custom terrain that you're bringing into the game. But really, everything else is free online. So you can really just sort of print things off and you're off to the races, just to, at least if you want to just test out the game. Obviously, it's a little bit more work because you would have to like print off tokens or at least have some way to represent specific things. Their measurement tools are a specific thing. They have range tools for measuring ranges, and they have movement tools that bend to measure movement. So those you might want to buy the official ones, but you could obviously make do with whatever. Additionally, their D8 system, they have different symbols. It's not D1 to D8. So you would have to associate a number to each symbol and do it if you want to use regular D8s, or you could just buy their dice packs as well. So you could get started for very, very cheap just to try out the game, which is very, very nice. But also the fact that every future update they have for characters is available to print off their website. It's official for them. It's not like Warhammer, for example, where if an army gets updated, you have to buy a completely new book, for example, if you want the official stuff. In this, each character in this game comes with its own card. So each card lists everything about the character, which is great. Again, unlike Kill Team, for example, where you're typically having to print your own third-party stuff off or using your apps, because sometimes you don't want to have to buy a completely separate book just to get the model rules. Each box of the characters, you get the specific hero card, and everything that you need for playing that character is just on this card, which makes it just super, super simple. So it's really, really nice for that. So if you have a future update for a character, you can actually go off on Atomic Games' website, and they have the official layout, but just with the updated rules, and they have them set so you could just simply print them off on cardstock and make your own. They are double-sided because there's a healthy side to a character and an injured side to a character, which we'll get into a little bit later. But if you look, for example, like for Deadpool, on the left side here, or the right side, can't remember what it'll be when you're watching this, but you can probably look at them and you probably wouldn't be able to tell just from looking through the screen here that the Deadpool one I just printed on cardstock off their website because he got buffed, or he got changed from his retail version, and it looks exactly the same. So that goes along with not only the character cards, but mission cards, for example, as well as your team tactics cards, which are just like one-time use special abilities you can use in the middle of a game. all the updates for that stuff, whenever they change or update everything, it's always for free online off their official website in the official format that you can just print off on cardstock, and it's super, super easy. So that's one really, really great thing about them. Additionally, all their models are never outdated. So like I mentioned before, there's a different version of the core box set, and you have different versions of the same superhero. So for example, there's like 2 or 3 versions of Spider-Man, but each one is unique. Like each one has their own abilities, has their own health values, stuff like that. So, but none of them are outdated. So unlike Warhammer and stuff like that, where sometimes models get made redundant, that doesn't happen in this game. Everything is always legal. For the most part, like they do have rotations for missions, and they have sometimes standard rotations, for the team tactics cards. But models wise, like I have the newest version of Captain America, for example, but you could include the old version of Captain America in your roster, and sometimes you might want to, just purely from a mechanic standpoint, because they come with a special ability that might work better with your roster that you're building. So I love how consumer friendly Atomic Mass Games is. Plus, just I think the general vibe of like Marvel fans and stuff like that, like the game does just have a more casual feel to it overall. Doesn't mean it's a super casual game, but I think just the vibe of things, maybe it's because like Games Workshop doesn't treat their consumers very great. Maybe that's why there's some jaded people, I guess, in the community. That I can't really find too much of that in the Marvel Crisis Protocol community. Like for the most part, like even when it comes to buffing and nerfing stuff in this game, majority of people that I find are like perfectly happy with it, and it's like a reasonable decision. Whereas in something like Kill Team, for example, one of my main kill teams is Far Stalker Kinband. They've had buffs out to the wazoo, but from an inherent design standpoint, they're just objectively one of the worst teams. And there's a lot of people that just wonder what Games Workshop, why they make specific decisions. You have a lot less people questioning decisions in this game. The second thing is the balance between competitive and casual in this game is really, really great. Again, it sort of falls in that perfect line of it's a fairly easy entry game to get into from a miniature skirmish standpoint, but there's still enough strategy and nuance to the game that your decisions feel like they matter quite a bit, and it feels very rewarding when you like make the right decisions in this game. So it does have a good balance between the competitive scene and casual scene, which is what I like, and there is a pretty thriving competitive scene for this also, which is great, especially on Tabletop Simulator. Because this game came out in 2019, it was actually a game that had to survive COVID, so they have a really, really amazing, probably the best tabletop simulator mod I've seen, even better than Warhammer Kill Teams, and Warhammer Kill Teams is pretty well scripted. Like there's a lot of cool features for that. The one for this game is absolutely fantastic, and like there's a Discord for it if you want to try the game out on Tabletop Simulator. That's another great way to just try out the game. But there's a really, really friendly community for that, and there's always people looking to play games on Tabletop Simulator. They run leagues, like competitive leagues, fairly regularly, which is very, very cool. And I believe they do have like real life big tournaments as well at places like Nova or LVO. They do have Marvel Crisis Protocol as being one of the big games there, which is very, very nice. So it does have that very competitive element to the game. So if you are someone like myself who does love the competitive aspect about games, but still wants something that's more casual, that doesn't require like as much brain power, but it still feels rewarding to play, I think Marvel Crisis Protocol definitely fits that bill. Next up is creativity and list building. So this is something that I missed about the old edition of Kill Team. In the old edition of Kill Team, and obviously like one of the main factors I think people really enjoy about big 40k and like war games in general, is building your army, building your squad, and having like that feeling like this is my squad, this is my own sort of expression of how I want to present myself in this game. And that's something that they removed from the new edition of Kill Team. So in the old edition of Kill Team, they made it more similar to like Big 40k, where you had like certain point values for each model, and you had to fit that amount of points in a specific limit for a particular game. So like if you had playing like a 500 point game in Warhammer 40k, for example, you need to have a certain amount of models fitting within that restriction. But that also gave you a lot of flexibility, because there's a bunch of different models with different point values. In The new edition of Kill Team, they sort of removed that. You pretty much have a set list of specialists, and that's it. There are some factions that have more customization than others, but really it comes down to like, oh, do I want to take this model with this gun or this model with this gun, and that's it. So if I, like my Corsair Voidsguard, Guard, for example, if I'm playing against another Corsair Voidsguard Guard player, guaranteed we're going to have the exact same models. It's just going to be guaranteed. And just with the way their models work. And there's some armies that don't even get options. Like sometimes you have specific armies and factions that you just have one list of models, and you always take those models no matter what mission you're playing and no matter who your opponent is. In this game, there's just so much creativity that you can have in your list building and expression of yourself, because you literally can make, there's 180 some models in the game. Obviously, like 40 to 50 of those are just different versions of the same hero with different abilities and stuff like that. But you can mix and match whatever you want. The only restriction in this game is you can't have the same persona on the same squad. So for example, you can't have 2 Iron Mans on the same squad because they're both Tony Stark. But in this game, you could have the Sam Wilson version of Captain America alongside the Steve Rogers version of Captain America. So that works, for example. But you just can't have the same persona on the same squad. And that's really it. Just like in the comics, sometimes the villains have to team up with the superheroes to fight off a bigger evil. You can make that thematic in your game. You could have Red Skull fighting alongside Captain America if you wanted to. You could have funny enough, in the competitive scene, one of the best teams apparently is Guardians of the Galaxy splashing in Thanos. So I find that absolutely fantastic, and so that gives you just so much creativity and so much freedom of like, maybe you want to approach it from a thematic standpoint where you just really love a certain affiliation and you want to go with that, but at the same time, you're not restricted to that. So in this game, when I mentioned affiliation, that's sort of what I mean by faction. So obviously you have like the big ones, you have like Guardians of the Galaxy, you got Avengers, you got X-Men, X-Force, but you even have some of the more niche ones like Criminal Syndicate, you have Inhumans, and there's a bunch of other ones. You don't have to do an affiliation when you're building your squad. The only bonus, you do get quite a few bonuses though, and that's generally why people do stick to an affiliation. But when you're building your squad for a particular match, so how it typically works is you have 10 models in your roster. When you approach a specific mission, it'll come with a specific threat value, which might get into a little bit later, but I'll probably make a separate video on actually how to set up the game and how to play. But for example, this mission here has a 15 threat value. Just like in other games where you have point values for certain characters, in this game you have different threat values for different characters. So for example, Hulkbuster here, which I absolutely love this model, he's going to be a 6 threat, whereas little Okoye here from Wakanda is going to be a 2 threat. So the missions, Hulkbuster. The missions have a different threat value that you have to build a squad that will be limited by the amount of threat. So obviously if I'm playing a 15 threat mission, it goes from 15 threat all the way up to 20 threat missions. Obviously it's going to be harder to fit in Hulkbuster if I want to go wide with a bunch of different models. How it works is when you're building your squad, when you know what their mission is and you know what your opponent's roster is, of those 10 models in your roster, you then build a legal squad. Similar to something like Kill Team, where you do bring a roster, and then when you know the mission, then you build a legal kill team in that moment. So in this game, to get an affiliation, because each affiliation also has their own leaders. So for example, Captain America Steve Rogers is my leader for my Avengers, because that is sort of the main affiliation I'm focusing on for my roster. He comes with a special star ability, and so that ability is going to be his leadership ability. And you only get that access, you only get access to that if over half of your models are of that affiliation. So if I'm playing a mission and I have to build a squad, over half of them have to be Avengers to actually get access to that ability. So if I'm playing with 5 models, 3 of those have to be Avengers. But what that means is those last 2 models, they literally can be anything, but they'll still get the benefit of the leadership ability. There's also other restrictions with the team tactics card, and some of them only work with a specific affiliation. That's also the other bonus that you get. But you can play with unaffiliated teams if that's what you wanted. You could literally just mix and match anyone with anyone. You would just lose out on those affiliation bonuses. But there are people who even in the competitive scene have played with unaffiliated squads and still can do something viable with them. You also have specific affiliations like Dark Dimension, Dormammu, or Hellfire Club Emma Frost, where they have their leadership abilities actually let them turn anyone into their affiliation. So that's a way that you can sort of also build and mix and match any characters that you want to and still get something out of it. So the creativity in building your list, it just with how many models there are, you can just pick your favorite models because you like their comic books. You could pick certain models because you like their abilities, and each model has their own superpowers that they can do, and they all feel very thematic and feel very, very unique, where every model is going to do something cool, where you can just mix and match stuff like that and just pick what you think is cool, and they are extremely viable. This is a very, very well balanced game, I found. And you can do cool stuff, whereas something like Warhammer Kill Team, that's not always the case. Like, assuming player skill is equal, like if I bring my Farstalker Kinban Kroot against something like, Brood Brothers, or Blood Brothers, or whatever they're called, one of the recently launched teams, I'm gonna lose a decent amount of time outside of like bad dice rolls, just because there's some balance issues, I guess, alongside the squads. But from what I've seen, balance is extremely good in this game. It's very, very well done, and no matter what character you're using, they're going to be able to do something cool. All right, next up on why this game is awesome is the theme. The thematic feel for this game is absolutely amazing. From the missions that you do to the posing of the characters and the models, to sort of how you use terrain, and you can throw terrain around to deal damage, stuff like that. There's some really, really cool thematic elements to this game, where it feels fantastic. It does feel like you're playing with superheroes and supervillains, because one of the worries that I had with the game that on the surface seems more casual. I was worried that it would come down to like, okay, I move up my model, we have two models beside each other, we just take turns chucking dice, and that's it. Because that's something that I just don't like about Warhammer, big Warhammer 40k, for example, is that's what it feels like in that game. That game is just like, okay, who can chuck more dice and who chucks dice first, and that's what decides the game. Whereas in this game, there's a lot more meaningful decisions to make. But because of all the superpowers in the game, because the terrain can be destroyed, because each mission has its own thematic rules tied to that mission, that actually affect how you play. Like sometimes they'll apply status effects, sometimes those objectives will move you around the board. It makes for a really, really dynamic feel, and not only that, there's a lot of characters that can push and throw other characters. So it's just, you have a lot of dynamic movement within this game, which is super, super great and is super, super fantastic. And that's one of the reasons I really, really like it, is it does feel very, very thematic in that sense. And each superpower for each character also feels thematic. Like, Captain America, for example, he has his shield throw, and if you get like specific symbols on the dice, the shield gets to bounce off another character. You have, a team tactic card for, I think it's like, if you have Iron Man and, here's a good example. You have a card that's, Deadly Duo. This is for if you have Rocket Raccoon and Groot together. You can use this special card, and it lets Rocket Raccoon do like 3 attacks in a row against different targets. So everything just feels super like pulled out of the comics, and it feels really, really great to play. And again, this is one of those things where like, I'm not a Marvel person, but it still feels really, really cool to play. If you were a Marvel person, you're gonna have so much fun playing this game. All right, the next thing I'll talk about is the hobbying aspect of the game. So these are just super, super simple models to build, and it was a lot of fun building them as well. It's also much less overwhelming as something like Warhammer Kill Team, where you look at a box of like potentially 10 plus models, and it can be a lot more overwhelming. Or maybe if you're playing big 40k, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to build like a bajillion models before I can actually start playing. In this game, you could get an affiliation box or something like that with like 4 models, and that'll be enough to start playing. And not only that, you have less pieces to worry about with this as well. Like when I opened a box for like Sin and Viper, there was like 4 or 5 pieces to build this character, and that was it. So I could build things and get them primed. Also, all the models should be gray. They're just white for me, just because I have everything primed and ready to paint. But yeah, super, super easy hobbying aspect, and it's a lot less it doesn't feel as overwhelming getting the boxes and feeling like it's going to take you forever before you can actually start playing. And the last thing I'll say about this game, and probably the biggest reason why I think this game is great for trying to get your friends into it as well, especially if you're coming from like my standpoint, where I'm coming from a more competitive game and trying to get people into a skirmish game like this without feeling like they need to learn all the crazy strategies, is this game mechanically has 2 really great catch-up mechanics, where even if it feels like you're getting damaged a lot and you're losing a model, you're going to be able to come back and do something cool. Which you can't say that about Kill Team. In Warhammer Kill Team, this is the biggest thing, is like, if your beginner players always deploy their models incorrectly, and if you're unaware of the nuance of the game, it's very, there's a good potential where you could get shot in your deployment and lose like 3 or 4 models. Turn 1, nothing you can do about it, and you don't even get to do your cool thing with your model. In this game, each model has 2 lives effectively. You have your healthy side and you have your injured side. So when you lose your health on your healthy side, your model gets dazed and they're unable to be used until the next round, where they flip over to their injured side. Now it is even more thematic, again, going back to my earlier point, where like your injured side could even have different abilities, they could have different stat layouts, and it adds to sort of that thematic element. But what that means is like, yeah, you could get one-shotted because your opponent got a good dice roll and you rolled bad on your defense, but you're still going to be able to come back the next round and do something cool. So you don't automatically just lose a model right away. Outside of like a couple of models like Hulk, for example, they don't have it, like Hulk and She-Hulk, they don't have injured sides, but they have just like a butt ton of health on their healthy side, like 16 to 20 health, whereas usually models only have like 4 to 6 health on one side. So that's one of the greatest catch-up mechanics. Additionally, the resource in this game is called power, and that's used to fuel everyone's abilities. It's used to interact with objectives, and so on and so forth. The biggest thing is you get power when you're dealt damage. So you get power equal to damage dealt. So let's say my Captain America has 6 health on his healthy side. Let's say my opponent got a super lucky roll on his attack. I didn't roll any defenses. I failed completely, and I get one-shotted. Well, I have 6 health. I get 6 power, and so next round when my character comes back, I still keep that power, which means that I'm still going to be able to activate that model, do something super cool with him, do his big spender ability to spend all his power and do something fun, and being able to potentially even, maybe one-shot one of their models back. So it's a really, really great catch-up mechanic, and it makes the game feel like you're always doing something cool. And that's one of the biggest things, is like, sure, I may be winning on points and I was dazing a couple of models, but my friend was always able to come back, do something cool with that model, and feel good about doing that. Whereas other games, once you start sort of falling behind on models and start losing models, there's just like no way to come back from it. In this game, that's not necessarily the case. So I love the catch-up mechanics. It makes it a lot more beginner friendly. It makes it feel a lot less punishing when the dice don't go your way, or when the dice go more in your opponent's favor, for example. And I really, really love that about this game. All right, but that is going to do it. I think that is sort of the main reasons why I love Marvel Crisis Protocol, why I think it's going to continue being my favorite tabletop skirmish game. And I think it's probably going to be the main skirmish game my friends and I will ever play, because, obviously with skirmish games, because they are usually more of a lifestyle game where when you buy into them, you just sort of keep staying with the models, and you get excited about the new models coming out, for example, and they're always changing the game, they're always making things interesting. So yeah, it's nice to have been able to find a skirmish game that my group is actually into and that we can all share and get excited about things together. But yeah, I think my next video will probably go into actually how to play the game and sort of how to set up the game. If you're curious about sort of the more nitty-gritty details about how to play the game, definitely be on the lookout for that. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.